I'm drafting only the top half of the dress on pattern paper because if I were to draft out the entire of the dress, it's going to consume a lot of paper. The pattern is on fold and I'm going to be making this pattern in a way that I could cut out the back and the front from it. Okay, so I took my shoulder measurement and divided it by 2, place it at the top there, and I brought it down by 1.5 inches and I connected it to the center front. Then I'm going to go ahead to measure the armhole depth, which is 7.5 inches, and that's going to form my chest line. I took my bust circumference and divided it by 4 and placed it along the chest line and marked it out. Then I went to the armhole and measured for the middle of the armhole, and I went in by 1/2 inch at the middle of the armhole. Then I connected this to the chest line and to the shoulder. Then I went ahead to mark out the bust line, the measurements from the shoulder to the bust point. Then I also went ahead to measure the neckline. I wanted the neckline to be a bit wide, so I measured this to be 4.5 inches. And since we're going to be using this pattern for both the back and the front, I just measured the back neckline depth, which is 1 inch. The style of the dress requires the waist to be a bit big, so I'm just taking down the bust measurements that I took at the chest line down to the waist. Although I didn't mark the waistline measurement here, is because the pattern paper was a bit short. I'm going to mark the waistline measurements later on the fabric. Then I went ahead to also add my side seam allowance, which is 1.5 inches. I'm working with this crepe fabric and I had 4 yards. I don't think I finished it. This fabric was very light and it was quite hard to work with because of how light it was, but the lightness was really good for the style because it was dripping properly. So I'm cutting the back first here. So what I'm doing is that I'm now measuring the waistline to match with the pattern and the hip line. So I measured from the shoulder to the waistline, shoulder to the hip line. So the waist measurement was measured to be the same as the bust measurement. Now I'm going to measure the hip. So I took the hip circumference, divided it by 4 and added the seam allowance of 1.5 inch and I marked it at the hip line. Now I'm measuring the shoulder to the knee measurements, so I could just use it as reference when I'm drawing out the shape of the lower half of the dress. Then I just went ahead to draw the shape of the dress down to the full length. After doing that, I cut out the shape for the back piece and I added seam allowances at the armhole and at the neckline. So this is how the shape of the bottom looks like. I folded my fabric again for the front piece now, so I'm going to be cutting out the front piece. Now I'm going to make a few changes to this pattern to suit the front piece, like trimming out that armhole area, and also I'm going to slash the chest line up to the armhole. I'm not slashing it completely, I'm stopping at that line, demarcating the seam allowance. So after slashing, I'm going to spread it up. So I'm spreading it by 6.5 inches. I'm going to fold the pattern paper in at the point where the neckline meets the shoulder, so I could form the new front neckline. So this is the new neckline. What I'm going to do now is, you see the extra fabric that I have at the top, which is about 4 inches, that's going to serve as the facing. So I'm going to fold it in so I could cut it together with the rest of the dress so it would have the same shape. I went ahead to just cut out the shoulder and the armhole with about 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I also cut out the sides of the top half. So now to get the shape of the bottom half, I'm just taking the back piece and I'm placing it so I could use it to trace out the bottom half and cut it. So this is it after I traced out the bottom half with the back piece. I'm also measuring the armhole so I could use the measurement to cut out the sleeves. So I folded my fabric so I could cut 2 sleeves at once, unfold, measured out the length of the sleeve, added my seam allowance of 1 inch. I marked out the previously measured armhole measurements and I brought it down by 3 inches. Then I'm just going to connect that to the rest of the length, and the width at the bottom is 10 inches. At this point, I remember that I hadn't cut out the facing for the back piece yet, so that's what I'm doing right now. Now I can go ahead to start sewing. So first I'm going to join the two sides of the facing together, but before that I'm also going to fold in the edge of the facing so it doesn't fray. Then I'm going to fold in the two sides and sew it flat. So after fixing the facing area for the front, I can fix the facing to the back piece. So I'm going to take the facing front side facing each other with the main fabric and sew the neckline. And I'll also top stitch so the seams can be flat. So the back piece doesn't have any allowance for zip. So instead of attaching a zip, I'm going to attach a button at the top there. So I done the facing to the main fabric, front side facing each other. And I marked 5 inches down at the center back. So I'm going to sew from the top to that point and then back to the top. After sewing, I can cut out with my scissors, and I'll just make multiple notches at the end there to ease up that area so that when I turn the facing back it can be nice and flat. Then I'll also make sure to iron after doing that. I also went ahead to join the facing to the rest of the fabric by the sides, and I also folded in the end of the facing. So I made a little channel, what do you call this? I made a little loop. I'm just going to call this loop, and I sewed it to the top of the back piece at one side, so that would be attached to a button later on. After doing that, I joined the front and the back pieces together by the shoulder, and then I'm going to go ahead to attach the sleeves to the armhole. After doing that, I'm going to join the front and the back pieces together by the sides with the seam allowance, which is 1.5 inches, and I'm going to sew from the sleeves down to the waist. So I said the waist because at the point of the waist, before I continue sewing down to the full length, I'm going to attach some of those loops again, and I'm doing 2 on each side. So I'm making sure that on each side they are on the same level, and I'm making them 1 inch apart from each other. After attaching them while sewing the waist, I can go ahead to sew down to the full length. I also went ahead to attach the button. I also made a very long rope with the fabric so we could pass through the loops to cinch in the waist. The last thing I'm going to do with this dress is to fold in the edges of the sleeves and also the edge of the bottom of the dress, and I'm also going to weave the insides for a neater finish. Alright you guys, that's all for this video. Please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you get notified each time I make a new post. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comment section, and I'm going to see you in my next video.